start with the first beep.
So let's start. Let's
Kerry?
ask Kerry whether she's got any questions before we do that.
Yeah.
Or comments or whatever.
Yeah, the only question I have was, is it okay if I miss a beep, like if I put the headphones down for a second and then missed a beep and then still do my 6 but would have missed
Absolutely.
1?
Okay. There's no magic. There's no magic about 6. There's no magic about all being in sequence or whatever. It's probably better if they're in sequence, but mildly better.
Okay.
So if you missed a beep, then you would come back and it was beeping or it was in the chirp mode or whatever.
It didn't actually happen. It was just a question that I was thinking about.
Well, if you take the earphones off and you set the beeper aside, you could either turn the beeper off and turn it back on again when you come back. Either one would be fine. If you're halfway into, or let's say you're 30 minutes into an interval when you take it off, then when you come back, the next beep is going to happen within 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. Or if you turn it off and then turn it back on again, then the next beep is going to happen within an hour.
Got it. Okay.
But if you come back and it's chirping, then turn it off and turn it back on again, and you're back in business.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool.
Other questions or comments?
No, that's it. That's it.
Then I'm ready for beep number 1. And Julian, are we going to alternate you, me, or do you want to do it the other way around? Whatever.
We could do that. Or the me, you,
okay.
Me, you.
All right, so beep 1, I wore the beeps during the morning again. So the first one was at 9:01. The exact moment the beep went off, I was in the middle of telling, I was on a hike with my housemate, and I was in the middle of telling a story about my dad, how we used to hike together. He used to hold out starbursts and walk like 5 feet in front of me. So I was telling this story, and I was in the middle of the sentence. I wouldn't even eat them because I was too slow. And then it sort of cut the story off when the beep happened. So as I was telling this story, I was I was present because I was walking outside with my friend, but also I was visualizing my dad in front of me. He was younger and kind of looked how he looked when I was maybe 5 or 6. He was wearing the old hiking gear that we used to have as a family from like the 90s. And he was holding the starburst out in front of me. And the scene around him was really green, kind of like sheltered, and sort of like a rocky, rooty path in front of him. So obviously I was still walking and conscious of, where I was physically, but I did have a very clear visual that I was referring back to when I was describing this. But in terms of the exact sentence, it was, I wouldn't even eat them because I was too slow. And then as I said slow, the beep went off.
Okay.
There was no voice in my head as I was speaking. It was purely visual in this moment.
Okay, purely visual. You're talking but out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask about the visual part. So you're hiking with your dad. You see your dad in hiking gear, and he's holding out a starburst. Is there more you could say about the scene? You already gave a lot of detail, but is there more?
Yeah, I would say. It's kind of hard to describe both taking in my surroundings, like the present surrounding, and then also visualizing the scene. But it almost feels like I'm looking at like a blurry photograph kind of in front of me. So it's like a smaller scene, but it's very detailed. Like again, it's similar to scenes I've described in the past where it does feel like I'm looking am a moving scene. So my dad's walking. I can see his arm outstretched behind him. It's actually his left arm outstretched behind him, holding a pink starburst. I can see the trees moving, like leaves blowing in a light wind, and my dad's kind of smiling. I can see his old glasses that he used to wear when I was a kid that he doesn't wear anymore. I can see his New Balance sneakers that he used to wear that he doesn't wear anymore. Just it was very clearly a distinct scene. I don't know if it is actually referring back to a specific memory because I don't know where we are in this. We're just outside on a trail of some sort.
Do you see yourself, or is it as if it's from your point of view?
It's from my point of view, so I don't see myself.
Okay. So the dad hiking, holding a pink starburst, hiking gear. There's the scene. The trees are moving. And it's like a move. Like there's movement to it.
Yes. Yeah. Only slight movement, though.
A little bit of movement. Is it like continuous, or like it moves a little bit, then it stops, or does it like repeat?
I would say it's continuous. It's almost as though I'm following behind him, but very slowly. Almost moving in a slight slow motion. Like it's technically continuous, but it's slow enough that it doesn't feel like much is happening.
Mm-hmm. Does the exact beep or the microsecond of the beep come at a specific point in this movement, or
the beep was
hard to say?
The beep, it's hard to say just because there wasn't much happening in the scene. So yeah, it's hard to say. I think it came around when I was thinking about specifically the starburst, so I would have been thinking about like his hand holding it, his left hand holding it. But yeah, it's not necessarily a specific point in this scene because not much is happening. It was more a specific point in my sentence where I was commenting that I didn't even eat the candy.
So the scene, but is this visual image scene, because it's the dad walking in the trees, it's kind of the whole scene.
Yeah.
Is one part of it any more like, are you like I'm more focused on the starburst at this moment, or is it just the whole thing?
I think I was mainly focused on my dad, like the details of him, and obviously the starburst was kind of part of that because he was holding it, but I would say he was most in focus, and sort of the trees and the scene around and where we were specifically was kind of just generic, whereas a lot of what I was visualizing with my dad, with what he was wearing, were old shorts that he used to wear, an old T-shirt that he used to wear. Like everything was like very specific about what he used to wear when I was a child.
Mm-hmm. And the trees are moving. Is there sound to this?
I don't think so. I think it was silent in my mind. It's hard because the sound in like my dad wasn't saying anything. The only sound that I could sort of recall would be the movement of the trees, but I was also on a walk, so that could have been just what I was hearing in my actual physical state as well.
Okay. And it's an image. Does it have borders or no?
No. It's almost like a watercolor painting that fades out on the edges. So there's no hard border. It's just the scene, and then it almost bleeds out into.
So it almost bleeds out.
My surroundings.
Is that like it actually visually gets less clear, or just that you're or the attention is more on the center?
I think
and
yeah, my attention and detail was on my dad, and then sort of, I think because I was less focused on the surroundings or where we were, it just sort of bleeds out in both detail and sort of opacity. It was almost as if someone was kind of erasing the edges ever so slightly.
And okay, so Russ, do you have more questions about this?
Yeah,
this part?
you may have said this and I missed it, but is this like looking at a picture of your dad, or is this like I'm seeing my dad? Obviously, he's not there, so I'm not questioning that. But
Yeah, I would say because the scene feels smaller than my surroundings, it feels more, and also what he was wearing was very reminiscent of my childhood. That feels more like looking at a photo. It feels like there's a little bit of distance between myself and what I'm visualizing.
And the whole scene is smaller than. What does that mean?
I think it means that I'm still loosely taking in my surroundings, so I'm aware of my feet on the ground. I'm not tripping over a root or a rock that's physically in front of me. I can see Amy, my housemate, who I'm telling the story to, in my periphery. So I was still taking in broader details, but the scene was almost front and center, like I was holding a photograph in front of me, but without my hands looking at it. So, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Is photograph more metaphorical, or is it like that there's actually something in front of you? Or like does it seem flat, or have depth, or?
It has depth in the sense that there's movement, so I can see my dad further up and the trail gets smaller behind him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the question was it like a photograph? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's some things I don't quite know how to ask about kind of the space of the image, if it's like, I don't know, or even if it's like overlaid over the real world, or if it's like an entirely different.
So let me interrupt that question, because I want to make sure that we don't presume that we're seeing the real world, that it's there experientially.
Yeah.
So you're clearly walking down the path. There's no question about that. You're not tripping over the roots, and you're not running into your housemate and whatever. So there's no question about your eyeballs are processing this material, and your brain is processing it, and your limbs are processing, and you're doing all that stuff. You're not falling down. But that does not mean that it's in your experience. You can walk or drive or whatever and have that processing be taking place automatically. Or it could be that it is in your experience. What I don't want us to do is to presume that it has to be in my experience because my eyes are open and...
I will say, in this instance, I don't know if it's bad to compare to previous beeps, but the example that I gave last week where I was visualizing my sister and I along the riverbank with kayaks, that scene with my sister felt very much to be my entire experience in that moment. I felt like I was taking in less detail. I don't know if that's because I was sitting down. I'm not, and so maybe there was less of a requirement for me to take in detail. I don't know. But that scene really filled my mind, almost as though I was looking at a bigger photograph, maybe a poster size, whereas this one felt like I was looking at maybe a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper distantly in front of me, maybe like 3 feet in front of me. So it felt smaller and less sort of all-encompassing, whereas the previous scene, I almost felt like I was in it. This one felt like I was looking at a moving photograph and maybe reflecting upon it, but not necessarily in it. That's like the best way I could describe it.
Okay, so not quite like you're in it, but like you're looking at it. Is it that that there's some distance between you and this image, or do you just mean that it's like less immersive, or less present? Like, is there some physical, visual, kind of seemingly distance between you and?
Yes, the way that I was visualizing this scene was, as I was walking down the path, it was almost where the path was getting a little smaller. That's where I was seeing the scene. So it was as though I was looking ahead, and it felt like there was a little bit more distance between me and the scene, compared to the previous scene with my sister, where it filled my sight entirely.
Okay. Russ, do you have more questions on this part?
I was muted, sorry. Yes, I'm good.
You're good? So, so you're also saying out loud, I wouldn't even eat them because I was too slow.
That was out loud, not in my mind.
Yeah, that was out loud.
Yes.
Do you experience saying that, or is that something automatic that's just happening? Like the way sitting in a chair could be automatic?
It almost, it definitely felt more automatic, like I was almost talking during a movie. So I'm looking at the scene and I'm almost explaining to Amy what the story is of the scene. So as I was saying, I wouldn't even eat them because I was too slow. I was saying that in response to me looking at my dad's hand, because he was, 5 to 10 steps ahead of me, purposely walking a little bit faster. So if that felt more automatic in the sense that I was like literally saying what was in front of me, not necessarily like articulating a story. A lot of the times when I'm telling stories, I almost will, think about what I want to say ahead of time, and this felt more reactive to what I was viewing in my mind.
Yeah. So the main thing is like the scene you're seeing, and then also maybe there is you're talking. I wouldn't even eat them because I was too slow, and maybe taking in some aspects of your surrounding. But as Russ said, some these things could be like entire on autopilot pretty much. Could you give percentages to what the main things in your experience were?
In this moment?
If it's if it's like 100% the visual, or 80% the visual, 10% talking, 10% everything else, or 98 1 and 1%.
There's
30,
two
30,
visuals involved, two separate visuals.
The visual of my physical surroundings and the visual of the scene with my dad.
Yeah.
I would say, spatially, It's really hard to give percentages. I would say I would go scene. This isn't really percentages, but I would rank them. The scene is the most detailed in my mind. So the scene with my dad that I'm visualizing is most detailed. I would say my speaking would come second, and then my physical surroundings would probably come third.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I reflect back upon it, I can see more detail in this scene that I was visualizing than I can in the physical trail that I was on.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned like the image of your dad, like is over a section of the trail. Is it kind of like visually overlaid, or is it just in terms of where it would be, but they're not kind of their separate experiences?
So I don't know if this helps to describe, but imagine on the trail I'm physically on, if I took a photo of that, and then I took a smaller photo of my dad and put that smaller photo on top of the big photo, the trails lined up. So it was like right where the trail was narrowing in my physical surroundings is where the trail picked up with my dad. So there was a little bit of distance between us, but it almost like bled in to the trail that I was physically on. I think that just also happened to be that I happened to be on a trail. That wouldn't necessarily happen if I was telling the story in a library or something, but it sort of bled into it and made sense from a depth perception or a depth point of view. Like it all kind of aligned.
Okay. Are these are they in the kind of same visual space or not? Or does that question not make sense? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean, sorry.
Like I don't know, maybe so you're seeing the actual trail and seeing the scene with your dad, and maybe in one sense they're visually just part of the same, like you can see both of them at the same time. Or maybe in a sense, I don't know, in one part of your mind you have this mental image of your dad, and in another part there's the scene, but those two parts aren't connected. Or maybe like it could just be that this question doesn't make sense to you. Or doesn't. Like,
I would say it feels like the same place. Everything I'm seeing feels like it's in the same place is how I would best describe it. So I don't feel like I have like a split image or split worlds, I guess. One that I'm visualizing, one that I'm physically taking in. It very much feels connected. Yeah, it feels connected in one spot.
Okay. I'm good.
I'm good on this one.
On to number 2.
Great. Number 2 is at 9:24. This one's a little less exciting. I was looking at my Google Calendar. I was in the process of dragging a reminder to go climbing. So I have a lot of, I combine my work stuff with my social stuff in my Google Calendar. So I was looking at the social side. I had 2 social things blocked out. One was to go rock climbing, and one was to go to a live music venue called Jamestown Mercantile. I was looking at Wednesday and Thursday. I was moving climbing to be later in the day on Wednesday while simultaneously looking at Thursday. There was a split second where I was considering going to Jamestown Mercantile on Wednesday, and then I remembered, at the moment of the beeper going off, I remembered that Jamestown only opens from Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So in my head, as I was moving the climbing, block of time, my voice said, they're only open on Thursdays while looking at Jamestown Mercantile. So I have kind of 2 rows in front of me, Wednesday and Thursday. I'm clicking and dragging the climbing appointment later on Wednesday, and then looking at the Thursday column, considering going sooner, but then saying out loud in my head, they're only open from Thursday. Yeah.
So I want us to be clear about the timing of this. So what is caught exactly by the beep? Let me see whether I can draw us a picture of what I have in mind here. If this, can you see that?
Yep.
If time is going across like this, and the beep starts right here, so this is the beep, and the beep continues to beep until you turn it off, and you turn it off, and the beep stops, and time keeps going on. The experience that we're interested in is the one that's right there, which I'm trying to put like 1 millimeter, 1 microsecond, just before the onset of the beep. And so the question is what's going on right here. I'm not interested in what's happening during the beep, and I'm not interested in what's happening out well before the beep. But something might have happened out before the beep and is continuing on. But the question is, what is caught in flight right at the leading edge of the beep?
Right at the beep, I was looking at the Jamestown Mercantile appointment on Thursday. I don't know if the beep happened. I think I had already said this in my mind by the time the beep happened, but I looked at it, was saying they're only open on Thursdays.
Both of those two things simultaneous. I'm looking and I'm saying.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my calendar, and as I'm looking at the Jamestown Mercantile appointment, they're only open on Thursdays.
And so does that mean that the moving of the Wednesday rock climbing block was slightly out before the beep began?
That would have been before. I still had my finger on it, which is why it felt like it was the same time, because I was just clicking and dragging while looking elsewhere.
But as far as your experience is concerned, that's over with?
That would have been more before.
The physicality of it continues, but the experiential of it is over? Okay.
Correct.
So we're interested in the experience, not the physical. If the physical is in your experience, then of course we're interested in the experience. Or we're interested in the physical. But it sounds like in this particular situation that the moving of the task, as far as being in your experience, that's a done deal before the onset of the beep. Okay.
Correct.
So at the experientially caught in flight by the beep are 2 aspects. One is I'm seeing the calendar, the mercantile block,
Jamestown.
and I am saying, or the words involve this only from Thursday, on Thursday or from Thursday?
They're only open from Thursday.
Okay. And would you say your experience is more in the seeing or more in the saying or the words, whatever? Or that question doesn't make sense, or equal, or?
I would say here it felt more like a 50-50 split between physically seeing and what I'm saying, because the saying was in response to what directly I was seeing in my physical world.
All right, so let's talk about the words then. And I think I introduced the verb saying. I think you hadn't said it was saying. You said that those words were present. So is it the experience of speaking those words, or of hearing those words, or both? Or?
It is speaking in my mind. So not out loud, but it was at the same cadence and clarity level of my voice normally. So how I'm hearing my voice now is how I was hearing they're only open from Thursdays.
Okay.
In my head.
And so last time we tried to make a distinction between the saying of the words and the hearing of the words. Does it seem more like saying it or more like hearing it? Or maybe that distinction doesn't make sense for you. I don't want to impose that on you, but...
Yeah. I do think I get confused by this question, but I think it does feel more like I am saying it. It's almost like talking to myself, but rather out loud. It's in my head.
So let's play around with the distinction between speaking and hearing. So right now, I am speaking, and you are presumably hearing what I'm saying. And a little bit ago, you were speaking, and there is sound involved in both of those, my voice, your voice, whatever. There's sound involved. But in one, that the sound is coming from me, I guess you would say, and so I'm hearing that. From your perspective, I would be hearing that. And the other, the sound is coming out of me, which I would be saying. Some people say those are exactly the same thing. It doesn't matter whether I'm doing it or whether you're doing it. I experience those things as the same. And other people would say, well, they're totally different. And, the sound is coming from you or the sound is coming from me. Those are two very different things. So I don't have a favorite. One of those. The question is about your experience and trying to help us understand what that is like for you.
I think I definitely draw a distinction between speaking and hearing when it comes to speaking with other individuals. So I feel like I'm hearing your voice as you're speaking, but I feel like I'm speaking my voice. Mm-hmm. So it just feels a little bit closer. And the same goes for in my head. So, yeah. So the same goes for in my head. Sometimes this hasn't happened yet, but I can hear other people's voices in my head. So I'll hear my mom's voice say something or a friend say something. That to me feels more distant, and it feels like I'm hearing them say something in my mind. Whereas when I am speaking to myself in my mind, it feels closer to me and it feels like I am speaking, but it's just not auditory.
So this particular one, they're only open from Thursday, is more, I'm gathering, more like speaking it than hearing it.
Correct.
Okay. And is there I'm understanding there's no real words coming out of your mouth or whatever.
No words. Lips are not moving.
And other than that, is there any difference in this from external speaking?
Honestly, no difference. Even like my tone, my volume, the pace that I speak, the accent that I use, everything is exactly the same.
Seems like the same deal.
Yeah, just inside.
And does it seem like there's a target of the speaking? I'm speaking to my roommate, or I'm speaking to myself, or it doesn't matter. I'm just these words. I'm just uttering these words out into the void, or.
I would say myself is the target. Sort of, yeah, almost like having a conversation with myself to help myself come to a decision of what I want to do with my social calendar.
Then I'm good with that portion. Julian, you got questions about
that? Yeah, one just comprehension thing. The Jamestown Mercantile is on Thursday by now, or still on Wednesday? Like you had moved it to the Thursday block, or?
I actually didn't move the Jamestown one, so I left it still on Thursday. I was considering swapping it, but decided.
It's still on Thursday, or not still on Wednesday? I thought it was first on the Wednesday, and you were considering.
No, so climbing was on Wednesday. Jamestown Mercantile was on Thursday.
Oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, so I was moving climbing to later in the day on Wednesday. Okay. Looked at Thursday, considered moving Jamestown Mercantile, but decided against it because they are only open from Thursdays.
So I hadn't yet asked about that portion, so let me continue on about that. So more or less 50-50, as I understand it, I'm seeing the screen. And what is that? What do you experience in that regard?
With seeing the screen, I have a lot of color-coded, overlapping sort of, I guess, events or appointments. And all of them have labels. Some of them have locations. I really struggle to keep a schedule in order unless I have it all written down. So it's a combination of like work appointments, social stuff, and then also just general things I need to do. So it's taking in a lot of information.
So let me interrupt that. And in terms of sort of training in the method, you've described, I think, sort of three, maybe two or three, sort of different aspects. One is what's on the screen. There's a lot of different color-coded stuff. That's a fact of the universe. That's the way my screen actually looks. That doesn't have necessarily anything to do with my experience. My experience might be of seeing that whole thing, but it might be something else. So one way to describe something is to describe what the physical actuality is. And the second thing you described was sort of a self-causation or self-generalization or whatever. I need to organize myself if I'm going to keep track of stuff. That may or may not be experienced at the moment of the beep as well. I'm not denying that it's true any more than I'm denying that that's the way my screen looks. That these are true statements, but they're not necessarily about experience. And so the purpose of this little lecture is to say our interest is what for whatever reason grabs your experience at this particular moment.
Got it. So at this particular moment, I would say my visual experience was very zeroed in on the Jamestown Mercantile appointment in the calendar. So even though there's a lot going on the screen, if someone asked me, hey, what's coming up on Wednesday afternoon, I'm not even really that focused because I'm looking directly at the Jamestown Mercantile appointment on Thursday.
And is this, I see the block, in which case I see it as orange or whatever color that block is, or is it that I am zeroed in on this unit of time, which happens to be displayed as an orange block or whatever it is? So is this a visual experience or a semantic experience?
I would say this is a visual experience. I'm looking at it's yellow, the yellow block of time that was scheduled for later, but I don't even know what time I scheduled for it because I just see it visually as later in the day.
So is it more faithful to your experience to say, I'm seeing this yellow block, or I'm seeing the Jamestown Mercantile block, or I am seeing the representation of the menu?
I am seeing I think I am seeing the Jamestown Mercantile block.
That happens to be yellow.
That happens to be yellow.
So this is not really about the yellow of it. It's about...
Or actually, I'm seeing a social block is actually what I would say more than anything. Because social is yellow. And it happens to be Jamestown Mercantile. That happens to be what I'm doing. But I think it's more accurate to say I'm seeing a social block of time.
Okay. So one of the things that I would like us to glean from this conversation is how complicated these things are. Am I seeing the yellow? Am I seeing the Jamestown Mercantile? Am I seeing social in general? Those are, you can't tell that by looking at your retina or looking at whatever. All those things would be in some way the same physical act, but experientially they could be quite different from each other. So what I'm gathering is I'm looking at my social calendar, thinking about adjusting, in the consideration mode of adjusting my social calendar. And that would be more aptly describing what I'm doing rather than I am thinking about moving the Jamestown block.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And I think I'm good. Julian, you got more questions about that? So what I would say, Kerry, is sort of as a meta aside here, is that everything that we do is a combination of trying to understand what your experience was yesterday at 9:24 and getting better at being able to communicate about our experience, so that next week, when a beep happens, then we've got some skills, and we've ratcheted our skills up a notch.
Mm-hmm.
And the keeping those balls in the air is what we do, and it's makes life interesting. Sorry, I interrupted you, Julian.
Yeah, I did actually have similar questions. I feel like this opens some new ones. Back to they're only open from Thursdays part. Does that come with meaning or no? Is it just like an auditory, or speaking, verbal experience, or
the meaning in that moment was just, I guess, don't shift it because you can't, basically. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
So it was like a semantic, like meaningful, like part of speaking this was because Russ mentioned kind of thinking through process, or like I'm trying to think of a clear way to ask this. Are you in decision thinking mode for this experience, or for this part of the experience? Or is it tied to, is it part of the inner speaking experience, or the visual part, or just all together?
I would say I was in, a decision-making mode. The wider context, I guess, is that I have 1 week left, so I'm trying to fit everything in. So it was more of like it was a decision-making mode, sort of a strategizing state of mind. That's the broader context, but within the moment, it was almost like, just stacking blocks of time to make sure I can get everything in. Not sure if that answers the question.
Okay, so the mode, the more general thing, and again, I think my phrasing kind of, I do want to find out about more specifically this block of time.
So I think you're asking a question which is more advanced than we're capable of answering, and that's where we're getting hung up.
Yeah, I think it's more advanced than I'm capable of asking clearly. So I think we should go on to the next beat.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this one was at 9:46. I was sitting in a cafe, listening to my friend Evan tell me about how he was working on a presentation deck for a job opening at his company. Mm-hmm. So for the LinkedIn ad that they were posting, they were actually doing like a visual presentation alongside the job description. So in the moment, I was listening to him speak, and in my head was responding. Actually, the beep went off after I said this out loud, but anyway, I said, "That's so nice," out loud, and then the beep went off. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm trying not to give too much context.
Okay, so you out loud said, "That's so nice."
Yes.
Did you experience saying that?
Yes. So I sort of said it in my head ahead of time. I don't know if that's like too far before the beep, but right before I said out loud, "That's so nice," like really right before, I said in my head, "That's so nice. If I had a company post a presentation deck, I would want to work for them." But that sentence the only thing that was super clear in my mind was that's so nice. And the thought of if I had a company post a presentation deck, I would want to work for them was not auditory. It was sort of a more conceptual thought. And then after thinking that is when I said, that's so nice out loud. And then the beep went off. So in the moment of the beep, there was no voice in my head, but I had sort of, because I was saying it out loud, I was saying that's so nice out loud. But in the moments leading up to me saying that's so nice, I sort of I said it in my head first and then said it out loud. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I think even though it's pretty darn close to the beep, the saying it in your head, I'd like to look at like just caught by the beep.
Yeah.
So as Russ pointed in the little diagram, that like caught in flight by the beep.
Mm-hmm.
So the speaking in your head isn't there. Is the thought component, like if a company had a visual thing, I would want to work for them. Is that present or no?
No. In the exact moment, also there was sort of a visual thing in my brain. I was visualizing a slide deck. So in the exact moment of the beep, I was looking at my friend Evan. I was out loud saying that's so nice, and I was visualizing like the opening slide. And this visual had a clean cut border like a slide deck would. And it was in similar branding to what I've seen him work on in the past. So sort of like a dark, moody, unclear image, and then white, bold text with like a white fine line down the bottom. So I could see the opening slide. I couldn't read anything, and I don't really know what the image was that was on the slide. But the edges were very sharp. Yeah, so in the moment of the beep, strictly auditory, no voice in my head. That's so nice, and also had a visual in front of me.
What would you say is most there between the image, the speaking that's so nice, and you also mentioned seeing your friend?
Mm-hmm.
So or maybe that's just background, or maybe saying that's so nice is autopilot. But could you give percentages to these things?
In this instance, I would actually say my friend is number one, my voice is number two, and the visual component is number three.
Okay.
I felt more present when I was responding to him.
Okay. So let's look at looking at your friend part of it. So what's that like?
I think I was focused on his face and his reaction to what I was saying. I now, reflecting upon it, I have like a very clear visual of what he was wearing and how he was reacting. He was kind of smiling as he was saying it. I was trying to discern in the moment if he was happy to be working on the deck or if he was annoyed. He was kind of in the middle of speaking when I said that's so nice, so I was also trying to listen to him. I guess I somewhat interrupted him in the middle of his sentence when I said that's so nice out loud.
What was trying to discern if he's happy or annoyed at this exact moment too, or was it part of a more general process? Like,
I think maybe that's more general. I was, like, as I said that's so nice, I was definitely reading his face and reading his reaction to see if he too thought it was nice.
So can I interrupt this?
So-
Because I think Julian made this a visual of him in a way that Kerry hadn't said. I think Kerry's first description of this was that she was listening to him, and I think Julian, if I'm correct, maybe not, but made that like she was looking at him. And those are two different verbs, maybe two different experiences.
I would say,
And things don't have to conform to reality. I can be listening to him even if he's not speaking, and I can be seeing him even if he is speaking, even if I'm really doing the talking. So the question is, what's in your experience?
in my experience at that moment,
And I don't know is a good answer too.
yeah, I think it's hard because I do think a lot happens all at once, so it's really hard to break it down and decide what is, I guess, maybe more dominant. But I think to break it down even further, I actually do think that the visual of his face was more dominant than what he was saying, because I was also responding in that moment. So it's like I see him and I'm responding. So I may not have been listening as intently as I maybe should have been.
Russ, I think, because I think when you talked about listening, I think at that point we were talking about saying that's so nice, which we could ask later. I wanted to get to later if it was more listening or more talking or how that's experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I don't know, maybe me and Russ will have to go through the transcript and we can point out what we think.
What I would say about the whole thing is that what is more valuable in our conversation here today is about next week rather than this last week, or rather than yesterday. We're not going to be able to discern yesterday because we weren't prepared to make those kinds of discriminations at the moment of those beeps. You know, am I listening? Am I seeing? Whatever. I got to think about that. And now looking back, we're not going to be able to do it. But going forwards, then I think Kerry is going to be more adept at noticing what's actually experiential and what's.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's probably not too much profit in trying to figure out yesterday's beep. I think it's water over the dam. And we're up.
I think
we're at an hour.
I'd still like to finish a bit more with this, if that's okay with you, Kerry.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to seeing Evan. He's smiling, looking at his face, and then you mentioned like trying to discern if he was happy or annoyed, and I kind of asked about that as if it was a separate thought, but could it be that that's part of looking at his face and like not separate to that, but it is tied in with the looking part, or no?
Yeah, I think I am, in this moment I was trying to be aware of, or trying to understand what he was saying. And so part of that was, in that understanding, was looking at his face to see if this was a positive or a negative sort of experience from his end.
Okay. So, and then the that's so nice, saying that's so nice. As Russ said, we get better on this each day we do it. But that experience, was that more like hearing, like you are physically saying, but experientially, is it more like hearing that or saying, like producing that, or does it not have the distinction?
That, because it was out loud, that definitely felt like just speaking, and yeah, felt close to me.
Okay. And then the presentation deck, presentation, is that like a PowerPoint presentation or like some other kind of?
It was like an opening slide of a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, so it's like a slide. There's a white bold text, fine line. Are you focused on any part of that, or is it more just the general thing?
I would say I was more focused on Evan's face, but kind of just, this was kind of below.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's also why I don't really know, like the details of the opening slide. I don't know what the text said. I can see the font, but I can't read anything. And I don't know what the photo was. It was just like a darker composition, which is pretty stereotypical of, film agencies.
Sorry to jump back, sorry for the whiplash, but to jump back to the visual part of Evan, are you focused on a specific thing, a specific part of his face, or no?
His smile. I couldn't tell if his smile was saying, yeah, this is really cool, or yeah, I'm annoyed that I have to do this as part of my job, and kind of smiling through it. I was definitely looking, I don't even think I was making eye contact, I was looking at his mouth.
Okay, so more the smile.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned at some point, like, what he was wearing or something, but is that visually present at this moment, or in the periphery, or more just, like, what he was wearing, so...
I think that's more in the periphery. I was more focused on what his face was doing.
Mm-hmm. And then, okay, now back to the slide deck. So moody, unclear, darker. Is it a specific color or just like general dark?
It's primarily black, but with hints of royal blue and red kind of throughout it. But it's nothing's clear. There's no clear like figure or focus, or it kind of looks like just abstract art and colors sort of blending together with text over top.
Okay. And you mentioned clean borders. Is that like borders and then that image ends, or is it borders and then there's the computer screen or a scene around that?
Border and the image ends. It almost looks like someone printed out a title slide, cut it out crisply, and then just had it sort of in my peripheral vision as I was looking at Evan specifically.
Okay. Do you mean peripheral kind of literally, like this image would be off to the side, or do you mean it maybe a bit more metaphorically, like peripheral as in it's not central to your, like you're mostly looking at Evan now?
I think kind of both, actually. So he was sitting diagonally across from me, so I'm angled looking at him, focused on him, and then to the left in my periphery was the slide deck. So both visually it was kind of off to the side, but then also metaphorically I would say my focus in that moment was more on Evan than the visual slide.
Okay. I'm good on this one. Do you have questions, Russ?
Well, let me give a little lecture about visualization, because I think your image is in some places clear, and what's clear is the slide decky portion of it, the edges of this is a slide deck, and what's not clear is what's in the slide deck. And I think that is a sign of skillful image creations, skillful inner seeing, in the sense that you want to portray for yourself a slide deck, but you don't want to portray what the slide deck is about. And you do that visually by having a clear slide deck and an unclear content of the slide. And so I'm in no way trying to interpret why you would do that or whatever, but what I want us to do is to recognize the details that we're looking at, and that some are clear and some are not, and not to be bashful about describing unclear, because it's actually quite skillfully done. You are imagining, and for yourself, a slide deck where the content is not important. The slide deck is important, but the content isn't, and that's what you see. And so, but basically, I'm reacting to you being a little, what appeared to me to be a little apologetic or whatever about, well, my image wasn't too clear or whatever, and that led me to wonder about, well, it's off in the periphery or whatever. All that. What I don't want us to do is to say, well, because it wasn't clear, it must have been off in the periphery. Because the other part of this lecture that I'm giving right now is that it is possible to be looking straight ahead at Evan and also to be looking straight ahead at this image of a slide deck. And yet to keep those things entirely separate. One way of seeing is to see the real Evan, and another way of seeing, even though they're both direct ahead. Which is not to say that I'm not believing you that it's off to the side. What I'm just saying is it doesn't have to be off to the side just because it's not clear.
It was kind of, it was off to the side, like over his laptop, but he was at an angle. So it was definitely in the periphery in this case. But yeah, not as detailed.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm good. We can do this again.
I'm good on this. I'm down to do it again.
I'm going to try to not use my template next time and just go with beeps. So I'm a little bit more focused, hopefully, in the moment.
See how that does.
It's a developing skill, and what works at one time is good at one time, but not necessarily good at another time. That's the object. That's what we're here. And I would say about the scheduling is going to be a little bit difficult. We're gonna make a tentative schedule here, but it might be subject to change after we figure out where Mel is and when she's available.